All right. Welcome. Greetings, Grandpa. Hoppy here with the Retirement Chronicles. Episode, I think, 7. So my headline for my episode 7 is Retirement for Rookies. Excuse me, Retirement for Rookies. What are you talking about, Walter? Retirement for Rookies? Well, I used to think people that were in their 60s were ancient. I think back when I was a young boy, and I had mentioned in a previous episode, when I was growing up, I lived on a hill and there was 5 houses. And there was 4 of those 5 houses were a retirement community. They were all retired. My grandfather was actually one of those 4. And they were very influential people in my mind. But I think back, here I am 5 years into retirement. I started when I was 57. Now I'm 63. Actually, 5.5 years of retirement. I think back, those people that I'm talking about right now are my age right now. And I used to think those were people in their 60s were ancient. Now, as I have hit retirement, now I do work part-time and my wife still works, but now I believe we're just retirement rookies. I mean, I really jumped into retirement and didn't know what I was doing. I think that happens to most people, the vast majority. I realize you have some people that micromanage their financial futures, that micromanage their personal lives, micromanage everything about themselves. I'm definitely not one of those people, and my wife's not one of these people. And the vast majority of the research I've done aren't those kind of people. Probably 60% of the people are not, they're rookies. They really are rookies. They don't know what they're doing when they go into retirement. And for the most part, I was like that. I mean, I did research on my company's pension and stuff like that. And I did that a few years before I retired. But for the most part, when I look back on life through sports and things, I really am a rookie in retirement. I'm 5 years in. I'm still kind of in the rookie stage. I have learned a lot. And I felt like I could give a little bit of that wisdom for my wife, for her to be prepared. And I actually had a few, not very many, but a few people that gave me insight closer to my retirement to do certain things. But I had early stages of my life, I got to witness the early retirement of 4 of my neighbors, including one being my grandfather. Now, my grandfather, he retired 2 or 3 times in his life, and he went back to work, and he retired early, or even earlier than me at 57. I think his first time he retired at 50, maybe even 48. And then that didn't last but about a year or 2, and then he went to doing a totally different thing and started working full-time. He did that for several years. He actually ended up building Pizza Huts. Not Pizza Huts, Pizza Inns. I think he built about 50 of them. And that was when Pizza Inn was a very brand new franchise. And then they later, there was, Pizza Hut came out and there was no more Pizza Inns. And I hadn't seen a Pizza Inn in 20 years. But he did that. So I got a few things I want to touch on in being a retirement rookie. One of the first things I think about is, before I retired, I was looking for the big day to retire. I had kind of looked at it for 20 years. I would say, when I retire, I'm going to do this. When I retire, I'm going to do this. I'm going to retire at this age or this age. And I was always looking for the big day. I worked the same company for 39 years. So although I did many part-time jobs in my lifetime and did other things, probably, and I'm listing these after every episode. I think I missed one episode where I forgot to mention a few of the things. I'm trying to list 3 things that I did but outside of FedEx that I'm a former person doing. And a few of the things I still do, like farming. But so I had, so my viewpoint is from basically a career job was FedEx. And then so it was always the big day was a timeline in my mind. And then the present is when it actually happened. I have that in my mind. So I have the big day coming up. And then my present is when I experienced it. And then the future, once you do the retirement thing, then your future. And so that's just a mental thing that you go through and things to look forward to, and then things that happen, and then things in the future, ongoing until you die, of course. It's like a time machine. Now, I want to emphasize this, and I've already emphasized it in several other episodes. You find out as you get older that time is so valuable. Time in retirement also goes light speed. It flies. Once you retire, I'm telling you, time flies. It's light speed. I remember when I was working, always 2 or 3 jobs at once, always. And not every single year I worked 3 jobs, but most years I worked my regular job for 39 years, and I always had 1 or 2 other jobs I worked during that year, and sometimes 3 at one time. And I was a youth minister a long time, so that was one other job I had on and off for 20 years. It's like a time machine, and it's like you're in light speed. Once you hit that future event or your big day event happens, it goes into warp speed at that point. Another point that I want is you got to let God open doors. You got to be open to that, and you pray for courage to say yes when He opens doors for you. So I like to say, back when I used to teach teenagers, is God's will 101, and it's part of it. You got to be prepared before it becomes evident. So you pray that you would have the courage to say yes when God opens doors, because in retirement, those things will happen, and you have to be ready for them. You got to be pre-ready for them. So I understand you pray after you see these things materialize, but you also pray before they materialize, so you'll be able to recognize them, and you'll be able to have the spirit to say yes when God opens that door for you. So another thing, a point that I'll make during retirement rookies is Memory 101. And it's like a course, and it's another thing you can prepare. And I've physically watched other people go through this, but your memory's going to deteriorate as you get older. It's a normal thing. Don't be too hard on yourself when it happens for your bad memory. There are lots of supplements that you can use for your memory, and there are also mind games that you can do that helps with this. But always remember this, and I heard this in a sermon years and years ago, and I've tried to apply it to my life and all other things, whether it be professionally or just on a personal level, is the weakest ink is better than the best memory. So just get in a habit of writing things down. If you're not already doing that, start doing it. It's best if you carry a pocket notebook, and whether you just go into the store and your wife tells you or your spouse tells you to get blank, 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 and blank, and it's just 4 items to remember, and you get home and you only got 3, but if you would have wrote that down, it wouldn't have happened. And a good way to do it today is just do it by text, and you always got that text to go back to. My grandson's pointing a flashlight at me. He's 3, and so he's full of energy. So, and that should have been probably a point. Your energy meter probably is going to decrease when you're a retirement rookie. Our point number 5. Our body sometimes outruns our mind, and vice versa. Our mind sometimes outruns our body. And so I have a personal story of my mom. She, bless her heart, she had a bad sickness called Alzheimer's and dementia Alzheimer's. I'm not sure exactly which one she had. I think it was really Alzheimer's. And I think there's a couple of different kind of degrees of that. Now, I'm not that educated on it, but I know she had a sister that died with it. My mom didn't actually die of Alzheimer's. She had an accident, but she was in her life. She was starting to get into the bad stages of Alzheimer's where she was going to have assisted living. She actually lived by herself, and she was getting to that point where it was almost getting time for an assisted living situation. And she didn't die of the actual Alzheimer's, but she did have an accident. But I remember that week that she died, I went to go visit her. It was like on a Tuesday or Wednesday. I think she died maybe on a Friday and maybe Monday. I can't remember if it was a Monday or Friday. I think it was a Friday. But I went to visit her like 3 days before. And my sister needed some mineral for her horses or something, and I had a Honda Accord, and it was like 15 years old, and that's what I drove. It is because it got good gas mileage. I didn't have a truck at the time, didn't have my retirement truck. And when finally, I never had a new vehicle ever, but when I retired, my wife made me buy a retirement vehicle. She said, I'm tired of you driving 20-year-old vehicles, 10-year-old vehicles. You worked hard your whole life. You're buying you a new truck. And that's true. That's what happened. But I took the mineral, 50-pound bags of mineral, to Oxford, Mississippi, for my sister and my brother-in-law. And my mom was there. She lived in a little cottage not too far from their house. And we went out to the barn. I had like 15 bags of 50-pound bags on the back seat of this Honda Accord. And my mom at 81 years old helped me get those 50-pound bags out of that car and carry them in the barn. So there's 15 bags, and she grabbed that bag like she always did her whole life, and she hauled it into the barn. And I tried to tell Mama, Mama, you're 81. You no longer need to be carrying a 50-pound bag. And she told me, stand down, back up, Bubba, that she was 81 and she could do whatever a man could do, and definitely could do what I could do. And she let me know right there that she could physically do it without a problem. Let me tell you, she could. I hadn't had back surgery like maybe 10 years before that. And so she was probably in better shape than I was. She had Alzheimer's. She died just a few days after that. But we went and watched the John Wayne movie. We went to McAllister's in Oxford and ate, and then came home, watched the John Wayne movie together. And that's the last day I spent with my mom. So I missed her every day since. I'm going to get emotional. Yeah, she was an amazing person. Lots of stories on her. I may tell those on here later. But my final point for today is try to stay occupied. As you're a retirement rookie, stay occupied physically and mentally. And like I said, you have things you can do to help you in your mental cognitive abilities. And you have things that you can do physically. Walking. My mom was a big walker. She'd walk 2 or 3 miles a day, and she was big. She would sweep the barn and clean the barn every day for a couple hours. Kept the barn spotless and functional. And she would do that 2 hours a day. And she walked. She was an obsessive walker, probably walked 2 to 3 miles a day. And that's no exaggeration at 80 years old. And I remember going into the retirement homes. They have wider halls in the retirement home. I'm not sure why, but those halls, the elderly always were walking. That helps. Is being a retirement rookie, get that in a routine. Farewell for today. And from a former, just an ordinary person, I'm just an ordinary person. I'm going to end in the 3 former things I've done in my life. From the former youth minister to the former yard man. Yes, I did cut yards on the side to pay for vacations. and the other things like that. I'd always have 2 or 3 yards I cut every week on the side for extra money. And from the former photographer, yes, I used to take pictures at weddings, and I did that for a while. Former youth minister, former yard man, former photographer, because he lives from the Retirement Chronicles.